Now, many of you, I know this because you've told me, are opposed to an Indigenous voice. Some of you are on board and some, of course, are yet to make up their minds. But it's clear now that the Liberals are going to oppose the voice. They're not saying so, but it's pretty clear that's what they're going to do. That's their right. I think it's the wrong move. And I know Peter Dutton's given it long and careful consideration, at least. But the Liberals' Indigenous Affairs spokesman and Shadow Attorney General Julian Leeser has been instrumental in the voice idea for almost a decade. He helped come up with the proposal. I've discussed it with him constructively for many, many years, since way before the Uluru Statement. But over the last 2 days, sadly, we've seen him become really a wrecker when it comes to this issue.
The proposed voice to Parliament will have a constitutional function of making representations to the Executive Government on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Minister, the Reserve Bank of Australia is part of the Executive Government, and interest rates affect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as they do all Australians. Will the Reserve Bank need to consult with the voice before making a decision on interest rates?
Just a silly question, ridiculous question, designed not to get answers, but just to make mischief. And he was at it again today.
In the Prime Minister's press conference yesterday, in response to a question about the scope of the Voice's powers, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, "The Voice is not about defence policy, it's not about foreign affairs policy." Prime Minister, what other matters are excluded from the remit of the Voice?
Again, this is not a probing question. This is just playing games. There's not a serious contribution. It's just mischief-making. The constitutional wording makes clear the Voice can make representations on issues affecting Indigenous people. It's only advice. No one needs to heed it. So if it strays beyond its remit, the Voice will be ignored, easily ignored. It'll make itself a laughing stock. It'll undermine itself. That's just the reality. But the Liberals, even Lisa now, are running a scare that the Voice will somehow be influential in all areas of government. That's how low this debate has already fallen. I spoke with Cape York Institute founder and Indigenous leader Noel Pearson, who's done more than anyone else to conceive, design and promote the Voice over many, many years. And I asked him whether outright coalition opposition meant the Voice would now be doomed.
No, it's not, Chris. I'm disappointed that we don't have bipartisanship. I'm still hopeful that over the course of the next 6 weeks, sense will prevail. I really think that for Conservative people, this is a tragedy if we don't allow for bipartisanship, because this whole agenda was started by Conservatives, and very deliberately. It was John Howard that got the ball rolling in 2007 when he made the commitment at the federal election there. And I can tell you over the last 15 years, up until really the last 2 years, it has been Conservative voices that have supported this agenda.
But John Howard and Tony Abbott would say that they still support constitutional recognition. They draw the line at the Voice. And more recently, you've worked very, very closely with Julian Leeser, Liberal MP, Shadow Attorney General, Shadow Indigenous Affairs Minister. And we've seen over the last couple of days in Parliament, he's asking questions not to support this measure, but to undermine it, to undermine it and even wreck it, I would say. That must break your heart.
Absolutely, because the idea we've ended up with is an idea that we struck with Julian. We struck it with Greg Craven, Julian, Professor Anne Toomey from Sydney University. You know where we hammered it out? We hammered it out at the Australian Catholic University on the North Shore in Greg Craven's office. And I'm just absolutely heartbroken with Julian Leeser's behaviour over recent days and weeks. He's disowning an idea that was very much a product of my engagement with constitutional conservatives such as himself. And I think, in the aftermath of all of this is going to be a great regret for him and for Conservatives generally, and for the Liberal and National parties.
So I just want to drill down into one of the key issues that critics are focusing on now, and that is that the Voice would advise executive government as well as Parliament. Now, this has been part of the proposal for many years. It's nothing new, and it was in the Garma proposal put forward by Anthony Albanese a year ago. Why has this suddenly come up as a focus of the critics? And would you look at getting rid of the reference to executive government if it guaranteed bipartisan support?
You know, it's when you say executive, what is really meant by that is bureaucracy. It's the government bureaucracy, the minister and his or her departments. That's where the action is. That's where the practical change is needed. It's in the change. You know, parliamentary laws are once in a blue moon. You know, Indigenous laws that are relevant to Indigenous people come through the Parliament once in a blue moon. But the work of the bureaucracy is where the practical business takes place. And that's a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month business. We need to get the bureaucracy working with Indigenous communities. And I think if we remove it, we basically remove the guts of the whole proposal, because, you know, you're exempting the bureaucracy from listening to the representations made by Indigenous communities. We will make this system work better for better results if the departments of government are required to listen to the views of Indigenous people. It is really the heart of the proposal here, and to exempt the bureaucrats from this advice would be to shatter the whole idea. So if you're really interested in practical change, everybody knows, the Australian public knows, that the breakdown is in the bureaucracy. And we need bureaucrats to listen to the advice of citizens, of Indigenous citizens. That's how we'll get the change happening.
And there's been no suggestion from the coalition side or elsewhere that if you drop the reference to executive government, you'd get bipartisan support, has there?
No, absolutely. This is just a game of, you know, find the next thing to criticise. We'll go down to the last comma. We'll make a controversy about the last semicolon or comma or full stop. You know, that's how ridiculous this debate is. I just say to Conservatives, come on, you know, this is the right idea. This is the right idea. It strikes the right balance. It's not a radical proposal. This is right for our Constitution. It upholds our Constitution. It will recognise Indigenous people. It will be inclusive. And I just hope that, you know, someone like Peter Dutton and Julian Leeser don't look back on this as Peter looked back on the apology, as something he regrets, the call that he made originally.
Do you think that the tone of the debate needs to improve? We've had critics of The Voice talking about apartheid in this country. We have both sides invoking racism. And I've got to point out, you at one stage accused Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price of punching down on blackfellas. Do you think we all have to lift the tone of the debate if you're going to get the community support you need?
I think on Thursday, that'll be the day. Now that we will have words in legislation to put to a referendum, I think the tone has now got to turn positive. We've got to look forward now. We've had a parliament. We will have had parliament generate the necessary legislation to go to a referendum. Now's the time for us to act as Australians, not as Labor people, not as Greens, not as Liberal or National Party people. By the way, not as Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, but as Australians, because what we're trying to achieve here is a unity. We want inclusion. This will do it.
Thanks for joining us, Noel.
Thank you, Chris.